Welcome to part 2 of So You Want to Be a Podcaster. So if you're a female podcaster or considering it, or you just love to listen to female podcasters, Jessica Kupferman is one of the best out there. She is the co-founder of She Podcasts, along with Elsie Escobar, who also works for Libsyn. So they have the hookup to know like the latest and greatest in technology, marketing, social media, all of it, and they share it with the group over there on Facebook. So I've been a part of that group for quite a while and have received so much support and information. I definitely recommend you check that out. They also, over on their She Podcasts website, have courses that you can take, whether there's a free podcast starting course or some of the other paid courses that I think would benefit really almost any podcaster out there. So you don't have to be a woman for that. But I caught up with Jessica and had a great conversation with her, and take a listen. Jess, welcome to the show.
Hi, Jackie. Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
So I just called you Jess, like all of a sudden I've known you for 5 years. So sorry.
That's okay. Most people, no, it's fine.
All right, good.
Most people call me Jess. I just don't do Jessie.
Oh, yeah, I get that.
I don't dot my I's with hearts or anything like that.
Well, you could. You know, I used to back in the 80s, but not anymore. So, you created this community. You have a podcast yourself. You not only have your finger on the pulse of podcasting, but you teach others. But that wasn't always the case. So take us back a little bit and how you first started working in the web worlds, to start.
It was kind of out of necessity, to be honest. It was a long time ago, and my mother had passed away in 2005, May of 2005. I was 30. Mm-hmm. And I remember I was selling advertising at the time, and I remember, if I was 30, she was 55. And I remember feeling like, God, if I'm only going to live till I'm 55, I cannot sell one more ad for these jerks ever again. So on the way home from her funeral, which is 2 hours away, I quit my job. I decided, and leading up to that, I had really was tired of sales and wanted to do graphic design. I had been learning graphic design and trying to teach myself, went back to school for it. So up until that point, I had just been like piddling around. Once she passed away, I was like, all right, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to bite the big one and I'm going to do it. So I quit and then took the tiny amount of money that she left us and paid for graphic design school and hired an ADHD business consultant because my husband said if he was going to support me, I had to.
Wait. So stop there for a second. An ADHD business consultant?
Yeah, so she specialized in working with clients that have ADHD.
Wow.
And as a business consultant, she helped me organize my business from the beginning to work with what I had going on, which was an incredible amount of chaos in my head all the time and a million ideas and no way to.
I have no idea what you're talking about here. I don't relate to that at all.
No, not at all.
No.
Oh, you're very lucky.
Yeah, right.
No. So basically, yeah. So her name was Linda Anderson, and she was at the time the president of CHADD, which is something adults with ADD.
Right.
Of course, I don't remember. Right. So she really helped me. Well, first, we talked a long time about what I wanted to do, how capable I was of doing it, et cetera, and so forth. And then she helped me figure out when the best times of the day were to work on these tasks versus these tasks, how I wanted to start my day, how I wanted to end my day, et cetera. And then the next time I talked to her, she was like, by the way, I sent you 2 clients your names. They need help with business cards. Good luck.
Wow.
And I was like, dude, all right. So I sort of started my business just figuring, just saying yes to anything that anybody wanted graphic design wise and just figuring it out as I went along. And then, it worked out okay, but I was kind of, my husband was kind of like getting impatient as far as like when the big bucks were coming. So I took a couple contracts here and there. One of them was for Subaru corporate headquarters. That was in 2008 when Facebook was happening. So I actually taught, I was starting to use Facebook for my own, like I would do a design that I'd post it on Facebook. And then I was just being my charming self most of the time. Just once in a while, I would post a design that I was doing. And they noticed that I had quite the following. And they were like, can you help us set up our account and tell us like how to use it? So I helped Subaru sign, with their first Facebook and Twitter accounts and decide within the company who was going to have ownership of those voices. And it was a great learning experience. I was actually there to help them redesign, with a huge website redesign, which they currently still have.
Wow.
And then, and then when that contract ended, it was 2010. And by that time I had grown my following to the point where being at Subaru paid way less than what I was getting to do my own design. So I was able to not have that contract anymore and keep up the salary that I was making doing, web and social design and consulting and stuff like that. So a couple years down the road, that was 2010. So let's fast forward 3 years, 2013, where I sort of feel like something's missing. I'm doing a lot of design and a lot of consulting, but as a kid, I always had been on stage. I did a lot of musicals and tap dancing and singing and choir and a cappella in college and whatever else. So I was sort of missing that. I wanted to be a speaker, but I also knew I was going to be trying to have a baby with my husband. And so I was like, I can't just start speaking all over the world. That's not going to be good for the whole pregnancy thing. So a friend of mine had asked me to be on her podcast. And I was like, when I was on it, the whole time I'm thinking, I need to do my own show like this. And I know exactly what it's going to be. And I mean, I became obsessed. I couldn't do anything else but put the show together and immediately start it.
Right. Well, that's great.
It was like a woman with a plan. Nothing could stop me. And I did that show until I had the baby that I had been trying for. And then when I was away on maternity, something happened. I just sort of was like, all of a sudden, it seemed like that area of what I was talking about, which was women in entrepreneurship, for me, it had been filled in. They're at least as far as I'm concerned, people weren't coming to me where's your show? Where have you been? There was no giant need for it. However, the She Podcast show that I had started in between there was growing like gangbusters. And Elsie was I felt like she was juggling 1,000 balls with no help. It just seemed like that area really needed assistance and a teacher and someone to, guide them through starting podcasts and stuff. So I just kind of went with the flow. And here I am.
Wow.
So So even though I have this branding and design background, I sort of use it to help podcasters grow their show and their websites and stuff, and then help them get advertising.
And that's great because I think that a lot of us, Kim and I talk a lot on our show about that whole pivot. There's so many of us who are working in jobs and punching the clock or doing what, and it wasn't really speaking to us. And I think when you after you have kids, you'd think that you'd want more stability in some people, but others of us, we look for something that can really kind of spark us, and give us that. If I'm going to work and I'm going to have to balance all this, I better like what I do, or love what I do. And so for you, but you have to also listen to what the need is. So for you to, recognize that people are responding to She Podcasts and, that there's a need out there and that you guys could fill that need is really important. I think sometimes when people do try to do that pivot, they get so stuck in what they think it's supposed to look like. So they don't necessarily kind of go with the flow. So, and so since you started She Podcasts, what has most surprised you about just the whole growth of it?
At first I felt like I was trying to sell it to people who weren't necessarily into having their own show. And now it more feels like people cannot wait to get their own shows. They cannot wait to sign up for it. And they're kind of like me the way I was when I wanted to start my show. It's just just get it up. It has to go up. There's almost like a frenzy of people that want to have it up. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm certainly not complaining. But it feels like, I don't know, there's a little bit of frenzy in our group and the She Podcast group where people they just pop in to ask a question, even though it's been asked a million times, when they're in such a hurry, they don't bother to search for it.
Right.
That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Or
and I think people
they don't realize that
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think that they don't realize that like you can't just like have an idea and then pop it up and then expect that it's going to be successful. Like I think it's like people think it's like the next get rich quick thing, and we know that that's not the case. You know,
exactly. Yeah. So that part is kind of a shame actually, because that's what makes so many. Now iTunes is going to be full of shows that have like 6 episodes, and then people are going to realize like, oh, it's not really a cash cow, and then they give up. Or there are people who do and then come back and then go and then come back, and that part is, as far as helping them get advertisers and actually make money, that's a disaster because you just look inconsistent.
Right. And that's the thing. Brands don't want to connect with somebody who is not in it to win it, or
who just isn't, like the whole point is to do it because you have that topic that needs to be addressed. You have to talk about it, not because you want to make money from a podcast. Like for me, it was about getting my personality out there in a way that I couldn't any other way. And it really worked because of me. If other people are out there that hate public speaking, aren't articulate, don't, and Elsie would probably disagree because her whole thing is like, find your voice and share it with the world. But I sort of feel like if you haven't found it, but if you have a hard time being heard, that's where she comes in, I guess, as far as helping with that barrier to entry, because I can't relate to it myself.
Right. Well, it's kind of cool.
I have no idea how to
from two different areas, because I was going to ask you that. Like, so say you have someone who's in, their mid 30s, mid 40s, wherever in their lives, and they're like, I think I'd like to try podcasting. And do you think it's for anybody who's like passionate about getting their voice out there?
Yes, as long as yes. I mean, I do think it's anyone who's passionate about getting their voice out there, anyone who has a story to tell, anyone who feels like their message isn't being heard or that they're not being portrayed the way they want to via their blog. And usually I feel like this is for people who just come off stiff when they're writing and they're not really stiff, but they seem stiff. Like, I feel like podcasting is perfect for them because, boy, you really can't hide anything about your personality in those cases, Right.
I mean, I blogged when back in 2007, I started a blog, and I was kind of in that when the mommy blogging thing started, and I created a website for Warner Brothers, a mom site, and so I was all into that whole parenting thing, and I loved writing, but I also know that when it comes to our podcast, we get our message across much more quickly. It's like I felt like sometimes just to write a post that was 500 words would sometimes take me a few hours, because you want to make sure that your voice comes across the way you would speak, or that people can kind of connect with your personality in your writing. And it's a lot more challenging, I think, when you're writing versus actually talking to somebody on the air.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, and also it's not as genuine. I think you should hear someone stutter when they're thinking, or, I like to hear when people are thinking about stuff or formulating their opinions, as opposed to just like the verbal outpouring of whatever they've come up with and edited and rewritten and edited and yeah.
Right.
So
what do you think about that?
Not as real.
People edit so much. It's funny because we do our show, 90% of the time we do our show live. And then, sometimes we pre-record depending on the schedule of the guest. And so we don't edit all that much, but I see other people who write about editing and how much time they put in. So what are your thoughts on that?
Such a waste of time. I'd be very interested to know how you do it live, only because my original brilliant idea was to have Lady Business live. And then I was getting very angry when no one was showing up to the live recording because I wanted them to ask questions of the guests. And then I realized, like, even though it was like 2 episodes old, I was getting like 250, 300 downloads an episode, but like not when I said so.
Right.
And so I was like, all right, I'm just going to let go of controlling other people and just... Well, just do my show and not have it be live. Now I know why there's no live shows. So how do you do it?
Well, we do it live for a few different reasons. I completely agree with you that, people don't like to make appointments anymore for television, for any media that they consume. I mean, with Netflix and Hulu, and it's not like people sit down at, 9:00 to watch their primetime show, right? So when you've got a podcast, or, our show is on 10 markets on radio, we can't necessarily expect people, unless they're in their cars, the radio thing is totally different, but we can't expect them to just, tune into their computers or their iPhones or wherever when we're on. But for us, I'm a lot more on my toes, I think, when I'm live, and I know, and I have to hit certain marks, and we don't go over, and it just feels a lot more authentic to a natural conversation for us. Mm-hmm. But also because of that whole ADD thing, and we also do projects on the other side. I mean, Kim's not ADD, but she's got 5,000 things happening in her life, and if I don't have to show up at a exact time on an exact day, then I know that we wouldn't necessarily have kept that consistency for our show. And so we kind of did it as a way to keep us accountable. That's how it started. Mm-hmm. And I like just the interaction that we get with people. And nobody, our guests know from the beginning that they can't say like, oh, can you cut that out?
I mean, I just don't understand why people take such pains in editing so that it's so perfect. Like that, it just makes me nuts. And it actually makes me nuts to listen to as well. Because what's the point of that? I do not understand the point.
Because it doesn't feel natural. So, okay. So, this particular episode is called So You Want to Be a Podcaster. So let's say they're looking to get into this world. Like, what is the number one thing you think a woman, or, obviously dudes, but our show's mostly listened to by women. What do you think is the most important thing they need to know to just get started?
I think it's the most important to know what the end result you want to be. Like, are you doing this to get a speaking career? Are you doing this to bring money to your business? Are you doing this to become famous? Are you, what is the purpose? And then I think once that's established, you can sort of frame your show, the brand, the content, everything around, reaching that goal. Mm-hmm. That's my best. I mean, knowing that first is the most important thing for sure. And then after that, everything sort of falls into place. Like once like, okay, I want to bring people to my business, like then to make the branding look like what your business is, or to make it a personal show, or is it just a creative outlet? Then it needs to be separate from whatever you're doing work-wise, that kind of thing.
Right. And I think there are a lot of industries that that it's a great way to share your expertise. I know people in real estate or in the medical field, or where they can talk to other people in that same field and share ideas, and having that niche is great. So I think for you, absolutely. There's a clear niche there. I mean, you're listened to by people who have podcasts, people who want to have podcasts, and I think that there's a lesson there. Do you think more so now than in the past that to be successful, you have to kind of make it about other people?
Are you talking about in business or in podcasting?
In podcasting specifically, because I think there are a lot more podcasts out there that are about educating other people versus like their own personal stories.
That's a good question. I feel like that's funny. Honestly, I think any show can be crazy successful if they are willing to do what it takes to hustle their audience. And not hustle as in like trick them, but hustle them as in like drum them up. Help them figure it out. Like any show can be successful as long as, first of all, as long as you have personality of some kind, but then also grow your Twitter with the people who would be interested in your show. Boost your posts on Facebook to the people who both like your page and who could like your page. Make sure that you are sending an email. Make sure you're giving away an opt-in. Do a Facebook ad for that opt-in. Make sure your SEO is on point. Like as long as you have your ducks in a row, if you just are going to turn on the mic and start talking and then be wondering where your audience is, it's not really going to be a good fit for you. It is a whole other level of hustle that I never had before in business. Right. And I mean, but that's what makes it successful, I think.
It's interesting because when I talk, my husband's a huge podcast consumer, and he listens to, the Joe Rogans of the world and the Nerdist and, stuff like that. But, when I talk to women versus men, I get a lot of blank looks from women of like, why would I listen to a podcast? Like, and guys are a lot more.
That's a shame.
I do see a lot of men who, they have a commute or whatever, and that's what they tune in to kind of listen. Do you think that, I feel like sometimes there are more women doing podcasts than listening to podcasts.
That's probably true. I mean, actually, iTunes says it's about even now. Libsyn says it's about even now. I don't know how they're tracking that, but probably iTunes has a better way of doing it than Libsyn. But the listenership is about even. I think when I started, it was 13% of women had them, and about 20% were listening. So
Wow.
It's changed a lot. It's changed a lot in the last 4 years. But I mean, I don't listen. I'm the first person to tell you I used to. That when I was in certain situations in life for the last 10 years, I was very heavily reliant on podcasts to keep me sane. Commuting. I had very long commutes, hour and a half commutes when I would listen. Hated my boss. Certain situations where I just needed headphones on so she didn't come my way. So I would just listen to Ricky Gervais or just whatever.
Right.
But right now I'm in a situation where I work from home. I very rarely go out. I have my groceries delivered because I feel like everything is I feel like every minute that I'm not selling ads or working on selling ads is like a minute wasted. So I try not to I'm lucky if I shower, to be honest. No, that's not true. I mean, I try to take care of myself. But other than that, I don't need to go out much. So when am I going to listen? When I'm on the phone talking to advertisers, when I'm on the phone talking to podcasters, I can't think about like proposals and stuff when I'm listening to podcasts. So when exactly am I going? I can't do it when I'm falling asleep or I'll miss it.
Right.
So I don't really have the chance to do it anymore. And I think a lot of women, I don't know if they're necessarily like that, but they may relate to the part where like if I fill my head with someone else talking, I'll forget something. That's kind of like where if I'm listening to to BROADScast, for example, and I'm trying to create a proposal, am I going to get caught up in the conversation and then forget to add a show?
Right.
Like, I don't necessarily want that to happen.
No, and it's true.
I think probably that happens probably.
Well, and also when you're so busy, like I'm the same as you. I work from home. We have a studio in my house specifically for the show. I do other projects outside of that still from home. So I'm not doing that 3 hours a day commute that I was doing just a year ago. And so I have a hard time too. The only time I really kind of force myself is when I walk the dogs. And, even that's not as much as it should be because what's
that though? A half hour?
Exactly.
How long can you actually walk a dog?
Yeah. So I don't
they get tired?
No, they would go all day. I'm telling you. But
really,
but I also have this whole thing where it has to be a podcast that will help me reach my goals. Like I can't just give a half an hour to something that I find enjoyable because I feel like there's not enough time in the day. So that's kind of interesting, so I'll listen to your podcast. Yeah. I'll listen to, other entrepreneurs or other podcasters and, kind of get a little bit of feedback. I don't always, like I said, I don't always listen to the entire thing, or maybe I'll skip around a little bit, or even tutorials. Like sometimes, for the back end, I mean, I do all of the technical stuff on our own show. So on the back end, there are tutorials, but they're like an hour long. I'm like, who has time to sit there and watch a video to learn how to do something for an hour? So I just try to like skip around a little bit. So before we go, I want to hear, so you went from teaching, I mean, you still have this community and now you are connecting these other podcasters with brands. Tell me a little bit about that.
So I work with a podcaster to find out who their ideal, I like to say partner, who their ideal sponsor partners are, their advertising partners, who are they already using, what kind of stuff are they already recommending, that they're not getting paid to talk about. So like in the case of this show, and again, I'm going to go ahead and reveal, that I probably haven't listened to it as I should have, but but like if you guys use Meet Edgar, if you guys are using FreshBooks, if you guys are if you both have very lovely hair with beautiful highlights, is there, if either of you are doing that, and I'm not implying that you are, out of a box,
right?
Then that would be a good a good partner, anything where people can look at the two of you and say, or for you to be able to say, I use this all the time and I would be telling you about it even if they weren't a sponsor. You have to use it. It's the only thing I touch. It's the only thing I use. Clothing, perfume, whatever. Mm-hmm. And some of that stuff can be really big and some of it can be really small. You can also look at like who you've had on the show that you felt really, excited about what they were talking about. If it was, and I keep bringing up Meet Edgar because I had her on the show before she had Meet Edgar, Laura Roeder. And I've always liked her. And then when she came out with it and it was a great product, like I use it and I tell people about it, whether she would decide to sponsor a show that I was on or not. So it's that kind of stuff where you're already excited and the enthusiasm would come through. I try to go after those people and get them to partner with you. And then I also have some connections where sometimes an advertiser will come to me looking for a specific audience. And then now I'm pitching podcasters like, do you have any desire to talk about like calcium, lime, and rust, or or is that a no-go for you? Or what about vegan condoms? Any interest there? No? Okay, I'm going to keep going.
That's hilarious. So they're obviously looking for, specific types of podcasters, some of those brands.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, those are two examples. They're like kind of real life examples. Like CLR was looking for a specific audience, like a millennial audience. I have had a couple people that want the millennials, and believe it or not, those are not as easy shows to find as you would think. Maybe because I'm not millennial. That's probably part of it, is because I don't know a lot of people who are talking to the millennials, because I try to avoid them when I can, because I have two that are my children, so I don't want to talk to them.
So do you think but do you think millennials get kind of a hard,
bad rap?
Yeah, a bad rap.
Yes and no. I do. I think they're very entitled, but I also think that they are extremely passionate about the world that they live in, and that they are very, strong-minded about their causes and the things they believe in. And I also think one of the great things about their generation is that they really don't see color the way that people our age and older do. My children have never seen that. And I don't think it's necessarily the way I've brought them up, although maybe it is. But they don't have any thought whatsoever as to whether or not what color people's skin are. And the fact that, especially my daughter, the fact that people, ever discriminated based on that disgusts them to no end. So right. It's kind of interesting to see that. And I mean, I've tried to explain it and, not justify, but certainly explain. And it doesn't, they just are like, whatever, it's so stupid, it's disgusting.
But, you got to stop for a second. And, the fact is that they do get that from you because, we kind of carry on what we grow up with. And so
yeah, of course,
it's not to say that the people before us were horrible people, but they taught what they knew. And so it's our job to kind of tweak those teachings. And then, every other generation, hopefully getting better and better.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, they discriminate more against white trash, and that definitely comes from me because I can't stand that. That makes me nuts.
That's hilarious.
So yeah, I mean, you're right. They probably do get it from me. I mean, and that's good. So yeah, I mean, I do think they get a bad rap. But back to the brands question, like every brand wants to talk to millennials, and it depends on your definition of millennial, because if you even look that up, it's not even really that well defined. Some places say it's 10 years younger than me. So anybody right now, now I'm going to age myself, who's like 30 would be considered a millennial. I'm not sure I agree with that because I had a friend at Subaru who was like pretty, I don't know, she's probably like 6 or 7 years younger than me. And she was listening to Nirvana same time as me. Like she's more Generation X. I think it's like, but what's Kim Kardashian? I wouldn't call her a millennial. She's like 32 years old or something, right? Like, yeah, some would say she is. Some would say she isn't.
Up to the even late 30s at this point.
But see, I'm 42. I'm definitely not. I mean, my sister's not. She's 30. Oh God, how old is she? Oh God, she's turning 40 next year. So like, I mean, it's just hard. It's hard. So when you say to me millennials, I think of 19 to 29, and if that's the case, they don't have any money,
right?
I mean, I certainly, at that age, maybe around the end of that spectrum, but most people under the age of 25 have zero cash.
So what do you think brands are going for them?
I think because they're techie. and they're listening to, because I know they're listening to podcasts, but that's because they're free, man. Like they're free. They have no money. No, they're free. That's why I think there's such a large audience there. They're free. Right. And so it's, I mean, you can certainly, if you're, and also I think that at this point I read that they now, in our country, there are more millennials than there are baby boomers. That was supposed to be the big fat generation of like, you know, now that they're starting to, unfortunately, you know, disappear for whatever reason, you know, like the millennials are now dwarfing, the size of them is now dwarfing the baby boomers. And so they're like, well, we better get some brand loyalty quick with these people. Right. Because they're now the biggest slice of generation that we need to cover. I mean, I don't know. But I'd waited a couple more years.
Loyalty to be kind of missing the, like, I don't think millennials care about that as much.
I don't know. My kids care about it my daughter cares about it for clothes, for jacket, you know, for the stuff she wears. My son
and technology.
My son doesn't care about. You're right. Yeah, I mean technology. Actually, you're right. He's very passionate about not having an Apple and only using Samsung. And my daughter's the opposite. She doesn't want to touch anything that's that's not an Apple product.
So funny. Everybody, that is like the most, more than politics, it's the most divisive thing in our country is Apple or not Apple. So it's kind of funny.
I'm surprised he cares because I don't even think he cares if his pants are worn every day for a week. Like I'm surprised he cares that much about his phone, but yeah, you're right. And I think he has a preference, you know, Xbox over Wii over, you know, whatever else there is out there. I don't even know. Like he has very strong, I mean, they do have some brand loyalty.
That's true. It's some. Very, very specific, I think.
I mean, like, do they care where they get their, where their aspirin? I don't know. Probably not.
No.
Right. No, they don't.
So,
but yeah, no, I mean, yeah. I love talking about millennials. Do you have any of your own?
Well, I have 3 kids, but they are, you know, little. They're between 9 and 12.
All right. So you have a budding one, sort of, if they still call that.
Yeah.
The 12-year-old.
And he's already all about the Apple, you know?
Yeah. See? Is he entitled, do you think?
I don't. I mean, I think anybody at 12 years old, like, I think that, you know, kids are very self-absorbed. You know, that's
too early to tell then.
Yeah. So I think it is too early to tell. But I grew up, I have 12 siblings. And so the way I raise them is very much like there is no room for entitlement. You know, we are a team. Like you are very lucky to have certain things in your life. And if you don't necessarily appreciate that or recognize that, then they can go away.
Can we just go back to the fact that you have 12 siblings?
Yes.
That's incredible.
Well, there are 13 of us all together, and I am the 11th.
Oh, my God.
I'm the 11th of 13. So, you know, hand-me-downs and sharing and all of that is just, it was natural for me. It wasn't an option. So I think with my kids, I'm very, I think there's a lot to be said for acknowledging the fact that there are other people in your life and in the world who need more, you know, if as much as you do, if not more. And you need to acknowledge those people, you know, and if you can't, like with my kids, it's like, if you just expect that you can get, then you will get less. I know I'm a mean mom.
My husband thinks it's because nobody ever won or lost anything when they were young, that our kids just like always got a trophy for showing up.
Right.
And so as a result, they have no idea how to cope with any kind of, like, they're entitled to win. They're perfect. Everyone's been telling them how great they are all along. Every time they try at anything, they win.
It's interesting.
So
that's a whole show in itself, because
we ruined them because we had such abusive parents. We went the other way.
But I think I think when they start, like, say they're playing a sport at 5 years old, like, sure, give everyone a participation trophy. They're 5 years old, you know, and encourage them. But I think as they get older, and my kids do martial arts, and you know what, they made it to black belt at different times, and not all. One of them is not there yet, but you know, at different times, because they don't invite them in martial arts to just test for black belt because you put in the time, you know. So I do, I like that they're not entitled to be at the same level. Like, you have to work for it.
Yeah. Honestly, if my kid got a participation trophy at any point, I would just ask the person to keep it. I don't need that kind of clutter in my house anyway. I don't want participate. I really would prefer that they just keep it. Keep the metal, keep the plastic. I don't need it in my house. And I certainly don't think I'd like him to remain proud of the fact that he showed up to play. Like, doesn't matter. I mean, I think at 5, they're just like, they don't win. Okay.
Right.
They tried.
They didn't even keep score at that point. It was just like, you participated.
Well, right. That's right.
Yeah.
You're right.
You made it through the season. So
you're right. That's a good point.
Anyway, so let's go back to the podcasting for a minute because I only have a few more minutes. But
okay, sorry.
No, you're good. So we have this. We like to call our listener, our perfect listener. Her name's Kate. In our heads. And she, like I said, is one who has worked and become successful in her field, but then had kids and maybe continued, maybe wants to kind of move out of that 9 to 5 or already has, and she's entrepreneurial. But the point is, like, I think we all hit a place, and I think the millennials are doing it earlier than we ever could, but hit a place where we want to create a life that I hate the whole work-life balance, but it's really, there's no other way to, I know, but there's no other way to describe it in that, like, creating a life that works in all of these different areas. So there's never going to be the balance. Like if you give too much to one of them.
Not in your head.
What's that?
Never in your head. Never in your head.
Right. But I think that, if you give too much to one side, the other side suffers on either side of the
annoying, coin. But it's true. Yeah.
But so, she's looking to do something that makes an impact, that matters. She wants to try, I don't think the blogging thing is necessarily where it was, especially personal blogs. Like, I think the whole mom blogger thing is, I don't even know that brands are necessarily acknowledging it as much. I could be totally off base. But I think podcasting is definitely still in that growth stage, and then I think it's a really smart way to go if you are looking to become an entrepreneur and you're looking to, if you have an expertise or you have a voice or you have a niche, something unique that you don't necessarily have to leave that 9 to 5 yet to start to build. So what would be, what would you tell Kate? She's working this job. She's wants to start a podcast. She's ready to be consistent once a week, or, what are the biggest tips or pitfalls to avoid, tips to give or pitfalls to avoid?
The biggest tip is to make a list of all the topics you might want to cover, turn on the microphone, and just start talking. If it's an interview show, I don't know, Jackie, do you think we should have more interview shows? If it's an interview show, make sure you have a really unique story that you're going to be pulling out of your guests, or something really specific that you're going to want them to teach the audience about. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, I would say, what exactly are you offering with your podcast that no one else can offer? And if that thing is you, fair enough, it can be, but make a list of all the topics you could cover. In my case, 4 years ago, it was all the list of all the people I would want to interview. And then all the interesting, like, for me, Lady Business Radio was not just like, how have you come to your success? Why are you successful? I wanted to know, like, the nitty gritty, like Pam Slim, Escape from Cubicle Nation. She does book tours all the time. I wanted to know, like, how's your husband feel about that? You're gone a lot, man. Like, how's that work? Are you sad? Do you talk to your kids on Skype? Like, I wanted to really get to the nitty gritty. That was my take on it. Mm. And so I didn't want the kind of show where I was asking the same questions of the guest over and over and over again. Cause the answers, each person is so different, and what they had to say was so different, but really the whole point was to dish with them about themselves. Right. And so if you can make a list of all the topics you want to cover and you feel like no one else is really talking about this in a way that you can, or if you can make a list of all the guests you want to have on, whether you know them or not, and you look at those people and you say, can you get a story out of them that no one else has gotten? Then I say you turn on the mic and start doing it whenever you get a chance. Just start. You don't anything but to just see how one episode goes, and even tell the person, I'm just going to try one episode just because I want to see how it goes. Thank you for being my guinea pig. Let's get started. Right. Just see what you think, because if you turn on the microphone and you say what you have to say, or you interview who you want to interview and you turn it off and you're not 100% jazzed about what just happened, even if it's not perfect, then it's not for you, and you'll know, and then you don't have to wonder anymore. But if you get like a total kick out of the whole thing, start to finish, you'll know. I mean, I don't know if this happened to you, Jackie, but is it similar where like, you know that once you do the one show, you're just like, must have more show. Like, I mean, for me, it was like all I could think about was how great it was to finally be the host and not follow anyone else's rules and not have to beg NBC for a job. Like I could just do whatever I wanted. It's my show. I could do what I want on my show.
Absolutely.
So that's the thing that makes you excited. You should just do it. I think you should just try it and do it because all the other pieces will happen once you know for sure that that's going to be your thing. And then you have to, people always ask, like, how do you fit it into your busy life? But it's sort of like, how does my busy life fit into my podcasting? Because the rest of the stuff all of a sudden was just like a have to do when the podcast was a want to do. It just totally changed.
Right.
I don't fit the podcast into my busy life. It's the priority and it comes first. It has to come first. The other stuff happens around it because you have to be dedicated to putting out those episodes, I think.
Right.
I feel like, am I answering your question?
No, you totally
really
are.
Want to.
You really are, because I think that you have to, dig deep within yourself to know, like, I think there are a lot of people who think they want to do it and then it's a lot of work, and it's the same with like blogging or, any other digital. There are people who are making bank doing, Instagram posts, right? But it's not like they're walking down the street and there's a pretty flower. Like there's strategy and there's a lot of work and there's,
and there's automation and then there's, and you have to know what you're posting every day. Yes, it is so much work, especially if you want to be successful. You're totally right.
Right. And people think, it's funny because, we've had sponsors and sponsors are willing to pay, a good amount of money. But people, I think the mentality of the general public is still like, oh, it's sweet. You have a little hobby on iTunes,
Yeah, but I'll tell you what, that's not the case with advertisers.
Exactly.
You may feel that way with the people who you're telling about your show. But if you were telling somebody who worked for a big brand, they'd be like, oh, really? You have a podcast, do you?
Exactly. Isn't it funny?
They know exactly what's up.
Thankfully that they're appreciative, and Kim and I joke all the time that we could say anything we wanted about our families because there's no chance in hell that any of them are listening,
Oh yeah. That's why I dish about that's exactly why I dish about everyone I know on mine.
Isn't it funny?
Especially my children.
Yeah. But I mean, outside of your kids, even like grown adults, that they're most of the people that I know, I can just imagine that they don't listen. And so I think that's kind of good because it gives us some freedom as well, because the people who do listen are really passionate about the topics that we pull out and the people that we talk to, that I don't want to post on Facebook and try to get people who I know to listen to the show because it's not necessarily their thing. And I don't want anyone listening who it's a chore for or that they want to do as a favor. I want people to listen because we are elevating and featuring these amazing voices of these women all around with such different, unique stories. That's why people should tune in, not because
absolutely
I want some more downloads. Like, forget that.
I mean, I when I first started my shows, I taught my dad how to use the phone and download a podcast. And like he never listened until I forgot. And then this year he was like, how do I listen to a podcast again? And I got all excited and taught him how to do it. And he was like, great. I really want to listen to your friend Ben Franklin World. Wanted to listen to Dr. Liz Cobart's Ben Franklin's World, which, by the way, if you love history, that's the show for you. Ben Franklin's World is really neat. But I was like, thanks, Dad. It's awesome. He's like, oh yeah, you have a show too, don't you? I was like, I have two. Thank you for asking and remembering.
but at the same time, that you don't necessarily talk to stuff that would bring value to his life, and that
I don't care.
Yeah.
It's fine, but you're still just kind of annoying. It's like I teach you how so you can listen to other people's shows. That's fine.
Right. So my in-laws used to listen, and they at one point stopped talking about what was on the show, and I knew, but if I started to produce a show that I thought would be something that they would enjoy, it would not be the authentic show that we have.
Well, right. I mean, to be fair, Elsie's mother listens to every single episode of She Podcasts. She's an immigrant from El Salvador. She doesn't give a crap about podcasting.
Right.
She listens to hear her daughter speak. Like Elsie, whatever.
If only we all had Elsie's mom.
I'm just saying, I mean, it's just funny in comparison. Although she did tell Elsie one time she talked too much. I was like, yes, that's hilarious. But, it's fine whether they listen or don't. Who cares? But you're right. Like I always assume they don't. And if they do, I'm not going to apologize for anything. So.
Right. And
they better keep it to themselves.
Kim has, her work that she does like with teens and her media stuff. And I think that for her, I don't want to speak for her, but, the freedom that she gets from our show to just be her and not who that other people, perceive who she is. I think there's a lot of freedom there,
I think everyone needs that. Actually.
Absolutely.
Not the reason to do a show, but a good reason to keep doing it.
Absolutely. So our last question, because I hate that I have to go. So someone's starting a podcast and they're looking to make a living at it. Do you then go, you're crazy if you think that you're going to make a dime in the first 6 months, or you could support your family of 13 kids immediately? Like, what are your thoughts there? Like, what kind of advice do you give people?
Do they like peanut butter and jelly?
Only
firstly,
the cheap
you
peanut
don't
butter, though.
Have to go, Jackie. It's your show. You can do whatever you want. But second of all, I'm just kidding. So can you support a family of 13 children on a podcast? I mean, you've got to have a big audience to support them with one. And I also think that people need to realize that a podcast can be multiple streams of revenue, not just one. So yes, I do think you can support, a whole family. I don't know. It really depends on the size of the audience. Like, people do it, but they have huge audiences.
Right. Well, talk to me about the multiple streams of revenue with a podcast.
So getting people to getting the listeners to donate, also taking sponsors, also, creating a course or some kind of thing that people could learn from you, depending on what your show is about. Like, let's just take BROADScast, for example, knowing nothing about like what, how you've monetized it so far, what you offer, because that's just the kind of guest I am, Jackie. Sorry.
Hey, you're the guest. You're not the host. Then I would be insulted.
I mean, I know your background well enough to know, like, I could guess, but like, I'm just going to take it. So let's say, okay, so BROADScast, I know that the show, because I did this much research, is, for women who are, being, successful, and to give women a voice of all different kinds of backgrounds. Is that about right?
That's about right. Yep.
Okay. So for the most interesting stories, you could put together like a series of like the most inspirational interviews as a CD, if people still bought CDs, or the most, that all the ones focused on health, or all the ones focused on success, or all the ones focused on spirit, and sort of break those out into products that people could download. You could also ask the people of, who listen to support the show, because you couldn't do it without them. And please go to this link and support the show, because we really want to, keep doing it, and we need your support in order to keep doing it, blah, blah, blah. And then you could get a sponsor and have the sponsor, subsidize some of it. It's also hard with a co-host because you have to split it all the time.
Right,
so that is part of the, that's part of the challenge, I think, is like, would Elsie and I, could we make a living for both of us? I mean, we're doing live events together. That helps. We've made a good bit of money doing live events. We could probably do more when our kids get older. I think at this moment we're not able to do as much as we could. So yes, I mean, I think she and I could build a full-time business on She Podcasts if we didn't already have other side things happening. So, and I think you could too if you weren't doing other things also. The other thing is, like, if you do have a service that you offer and she has a service that she offers, make sure you do a spot for it within every show. If you need help with this, Jackie's your person for that. If you need help with this, she's your person for that. And make sure you check us out, even read testimonials. You could, again, now this is where I'm talking about hustle your audience the other way. You could hustle your audience into, hustle makes it sound like a bad word, but
no, I just think about the dance.
Oh, you do? I think of the sell, like, check it out, don't forget, sign up, that to me, that's the hustle. You could be encouraging them to help you make that business if you wanted to. 13 kids is a lot to feed. I don't know if I would rely on it just on that, unless you're like Allie Brown, Oprah. She could just on a podcast probably make enough, because brands would.
Right, of course. Yeah, and I don't think people are having 13 kids anymore, necessarily.
There's always room to grow, though. Like, I see like my Facebook page, my Twitter, the She Podcast Twitter, I know I could do more with it. I know it could be bigger. Any show I look at and I just see it and I know it could be bigger. If you wanted to put the effort into definitely making it a full-time job, you could, and it would work. But most people have other stuff they're doing. Podcasting is usually the last thing they're counting on. So if you're listening to this and you want it to be the first thing that you're counting on, I mean, I think you can do it. Yes. I don't think you should expect to make 6 figures the first year.
Right.
But I do think you can do it.
Yeah. And I think, it's definitely something that you can make a living at some point, I believe, but it takes a lot more than what people think it does. And there's always, like, I focus very much on producing, 2 hours a week of content. And, it's timely and it's responding to a lot of things that are happening in the world. And sometimes, it's interviews with people who have something happening, a book coming out or they're on their tour or whatever it is. But I try to focus on that because my background is television and I love well-produced, interesting content. But you're absolutely right that does that mean that the social media sides of it, because I do a lot of it on my own.
It's huge. You have to.
It is, but I do a lot of it on my own that you get to the point where it's the end of the day and you're like, wow, I didn't do those 3 things. And they're all so important, uniquely important, so I think
they certainly are.
How did you?
The key to listeners is eyeballs, not ears. People need to see that show in order to listen. And if you don't tell them about it on social media, you're dead in the water, I think.
Yeah. And I think a lot of us, even when you see the numbers come in and the downloads, sometimes because you don't have that feedback with people's like physical voices, you feel like you're kind of like talking in a closet, like you're on a mic and you're like, is anyone listening to this? But you know that they are because you see that they are. But it's I think that's for me sometimes the thing to overcome is to understand that just because you're not getting, 1,000 comments on a post or a show, it doesn't mean that people aren't listening and taking something from your show.
Right. That's very true.
Because people are just consumers. They don't necessarily give the feedback. Remember in the blogging days when people would you'd get hundreds of comments, and now they don't even want to leave Facebook to consume any, content.
But I got to ask them for feedback too. Constantly. Right. I mean, Elsie constantly asks them to tell us what they think and tell us what you would do. Tell us if you read it. Tell us if you've had, she's like the queen of engagement. She's constantly asking them to give us feedback. And I mean, even if we get 1 or 2, it's a miracle. Right. You're right.
Yeah.
But
and I think that's where Kim and I struggle the most in our show is that we don't necessarily get that feedback at all times. But also like we don't, a lot of the advice that successful podcasters give is to listen to your audience. But when you talk to your audience and you don't hear back, you tend to stop talking. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, that's true.
So, and asking for anything. That's another thing. It's like, I don't know if that's a female thing, a generational thing, but
that's
ask
part of
somebody...
why I started the She Podcast group, because I know it is. I know it's a female thing. And so I wanted you to be able to say to other women, how do you ask for donations? Because men will just be like, you just ask.
Yeah. Yeah. And donations or downloads or reviews or any of that.
Or to be interviewed. Yeah, it's hard.
I find it tremendously difficult to ask. And I know that there are people out there who listen to our show and listen to it regularly. But, to ask them for anything other than to listen it feels awkward and just totally self-serving.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway.
It's true. Yeah.
I struggle with that.
I mean, I do too. I have this ridiculously annoying need to be liked, and I always want to know how to say things to people without hurting their feelings. And I've had to learn, to stop caring if their feelings are hurt, and it's their problem.
Right.
It's hard, but
it's good. It's a good lesson. Okay, so tell people where they should reach out to you and find you and tell you how much they love you.
Oh, well, anyway. Just scream it from the rooftops. No, I am on Twitter at Jess Kupferman, and also I have a website for my agency. It's jkmagency.com. And let's see, where else? She Podcasts. I'm all over that site, shepodcast.com, if you want to learn about podcasting. And Should I say Twitter? Twitter and Facebook are both Jess Kupferman.
Okay, cool. Yeah, because I think that, and that She Podcasts group is not necessarily for those who are already in the thick of it, but those who are considering it. Yes?
Definitely. Yeah, we have a shepodcast.com/101. It's a free course. So you can download it. It's about 17 videos, and it'll help you go through the process of figuring out, what to do, I guess, how to get started.
That's perfect. Well, Jess, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great.
I could talk to you for the next 3 hours about podcasting.
I know. Someday.
But I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Have a good day.
Thank you for having me. You guys, talk to you soon.
Thank you so much to Jessica Kupferman for joining me for part 2. Now, if you have not heard part 1 with John Lee Dumas, head on over and listen to that right now. You can also find all of our regular BROADScast episodes over on BROADScast.com or subscribe in iTunes. And also, if you're looking to start to monetize or increase that monetization, Jess is a pro at that. And so you definitely want to look into that and hook up with her there. So thanks so much for listening. Next time, we will be talking with Mark Asquith of Podcast Websites and also of Excellence Expected. So look for that coming soon. Talk to you next time.